Here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, of course, we give the opportunity for those who have questions following the service. Who here has a question? Yeah. Yes.
When you talked about the city had no need of a sun or a moon, and could that be a symbolic in the way that Joseph's dream was symbolic of the sun and the moon? That it was his dream was interpreted that was administrative, governmental thing, because the passage just go on to talk about a governmental system somehow in the light of the Lamb and the glory of God, that all governments will come. So could that be symbolic as opposed to an actual sun and the moon?
Yeah, it certainly could be, because later on we see kings and so forth. But they do not. The kings are bringing their glory into it, but it doesn't seem like the kings are administering much of anything. This is, again, difficult for me to figure out, because if you have like a cube this big, how do you get light into it? Well, I guess you get light into it because everything's clear, and that you can see it as well. But we know that God Himself is administering it. But I do believe that the sun and the moon could be understood that way, because we have definite examples of, especially in Isaiah, examples of the sun and moon, and we have it in Acts 2 also, the sun and moon representing authority figures in people's lives. And to your point, the first time we run into the idea of the sun and the moon is in Jacob's being authority figures, is in Joseph's dream, which, as you mentioned, Jacob immediately interprets as the authority figures in Joseph's life. So it certainly could be that. The sun and the moon represent an awful lot of things in Scripture. It could be that. Yes?
Can you talk about why we would all need a mansion when we get there? Why don't we all just have huts if we're all going to be, I don't know, why would we need a mansion?
I don't know. I don't think we do need a mansion. We just get one anyway. Really. Some people think this song is offensive. I'm not sure if it's offensive or not. This is a really old song. Maybe you've heard it. It's an old country or gospel song. Just build me a cabin in the corner of glory land. Anybody here ever heard that one? What do you think of that? I'm not sure if that's offensive or not. I don't know. I mean, if everybody else has a mansion and I just get a cabin in the corner of glory, I don't know. I don't know. We should be thrilled with the cabin in the corner of glory land. But we get much more, apparently. Apparently. Yes?
I guess it's more of just a comment. I think it's really interesting that you have so many people saying that Christ is coming back soon, but based on those numbers that you're giving us, clearly we are nowhere near that, and that's a tangible thing that you can say. But it says this in Revelations. How do you combat that? So you actually have a comeback now when people say it, because before it's just like, well, ideas or thoughts or different theological debates on different things, right. But this is a specific, and it also reiterates the dominion mandate and the be fruitful and multiply that was never taken back in the original. I mean, if we're supposed to have that many people, then we do need to keep multiplying. We do need to keep having more children, and having two children isn't really going to do it, because you're just replacing yourself. You need to really have more than two. Yeah. It's interesting.
It is interesting. And that New Jerusalem clearly is made to be populated. There's going to be lots and lots of people, which was God's original intent. First thing, fill this place up with people. Where is everybody? And we still say that, right? Where is everybody? I get a kick out people say, well, we're overpopulated. And have you ever done it? Most of you probably have. Have you ever gotten on a plane and went west, and once you get past the east a little bit, a few houses, farms, and so forth, you go over the west, you have mile after mile after mile, and you're lucky if you see a trail. Even here in the east, along our main roads, take the Pennsylvania Turnpike and go west a little ways, or even our north-south corridors, you can often go mile after mile after mile, even in our populated East Coast here, and just see trees, occasional house. Something I've noticed as I've done this. Let's just get some people around here. Where is everybody? Yeah.
The seventh angel significance of it in chapter 17, introducing the harlot, and then also introducing the bride. Is there it seems like it's the same angel, same types of.
It appears to be.
Like, is there a correlation there that Kaiser or someone draws out on what that seventh angel?
Kaiser doesn't, but you're talking about the fact that it's the same angel, or it's the seventh angel, or both.
Yeah, it's the same angel, it's the seventh angel. Like
Yeah.
it's the final angel.
Yeah.
Is doing. Is there a significance that?
The most significance I can draw out of is what I said in the sermon, obviously, is that which is a curse to the wicked is a blessing to the righteous. Something that we have trouble embracing, unfortunately, when we really should embrace that. There's a lot of people do a lot more with the numbers than I do, but you can't get away from the numbers because they're there for a reason. You can't get away from it, just like the furlongs and all that kind of thing. They're there, and they're there for a reason. John could have skipped that. So is he saying that this is is he representing with the seventh angel that being the final state of things? It could be, but I just cannot make it work myself in an ironclad case, put it that way. We all love ironclad cases. I come up short on an awful lot in this book. Yes?
I'm kind of thinking out loud here. You talked about the temporary nature of evil and the permanent and overarching nature of righteousness. Over a long span in history, you can see that working out. As John alluded to in his prayer, where we sit today, we've got some pretty evil things that seem to be in control, yet we've still got some things in our favor. How do we balance living in opposition to the spirit of the age, where the power is in the hands of the people that are evil? We know that that's temporary, but we don't know how temporary from our point of view. So somehow in the midst of that, I don't say we make peace with it, but somehow in the middle of that, we carve out the best we can a life of righteousness and happiness for ourselves and our family. How do you put all that together?
How do you live as a godly person in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation?
On the other hand, as our friends from South Africa point out to us, they say, man, you guys have it great what we have. So we're sort of in a situation where we're in the middle of this thing that's getting worse as we go on year to year. Yet we know sometime it's going to get better, and God has given us things that we can use to make a good life for our family.
Yeah. Your question is not what do we do, it's how do we get it done, really. And we have some examples in the Old Testament that I can't flesh out enough. I know I've mentioned them before. One is that guy Jonadab, who apparently was a real good man. Apparently, because when Jehu goes to kill off the sons of Ahab, he gets Jonadab up in the chariot with him, say, "Come, watch this." He knew that Jonadab was a righteous man. There was another righteous man, and Jonadab lived through Ahab, which was a hard thing to do. Ahab was really bad, and he hated those who believed in the true God because his wife Jezebel wanted to get rid of anybody who wouldn't worship Baal. Jonadab made it somehow. Naboth did not. Naboth was also a righteous man. He wouldn't sell his vineyard to Ahab, and he winds up getting himself killed. I think the best I can do in a short discussion like this is to realize that goodness and God are eternal. And this is easier to say than to do, our lives are temporary. And that if we can remember that our lives are really temporary, but goodness and righteousness last forever, I think it'll give us some perspective on this point. We saw earlier that in Revelation that one of the qualifiers, one of the quality points for those who loved Christ was they did not love their lives to the death. It seems to me that if we love our lives to the death, then we're saying at the same time that goodness and righteousness is not what's eternal, but what really counts is our lives, our comfort, and so forth. Again, easier to say than to do. We do have other examples in the scriptures. During Ahab, we have Obadiah. I think we've talked about him before, who was feeding the prophets of God in caves and so forth, doing it right under Ahab's nose, and Ahab didn't know it. On the other hand, so Obadiah had found some kind of way, and the Bible tells us he feared the Lord greatly. He was a good man, a godly man, but right under Ahab's nose, he was feeding the prophets. Somehow he was getting along with everybody. I don't know how he was doing it. Elijah, on the other hand, got along with nobody. And Ahab wanted to kill him directly. So you have these two contrasting men. They both found a way to interact with Ahab. One was hated and the other one was apparently ignored. How they actually did it day to day, we're not told. Which is my excuse for not telling you anything more. I wish I knew how, I seriously wish I knew how Obadiah did it. How did he interact with people?
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to discern is the dividing line between working with what you have. It's a real tough.
Yeah, and it's a very old challenge. You see this all the time in areas where there's great persecution, for example. There are some people that learn how to live with their communist overlords or their Islamic overlords or whomever. You hear this today in Saudi Arabia, where people are secret believers. And some people say you can't be a secret believer. Other people say you can. I think we do have examples of secret believers in Scripture. This is difficult stuff, and it's an old problem, and I certainly have not gotten to the bottom of it yet. It is an old problem. You had it in Rome, for example. You read different accounts. Some people were out there with it, and some people were not. I don't know the answer to that question, which I think really is what your question. How, hey, if you're ashamed of me, then I'll be ashamed of you. Well, if you're a secret believer, does that mean you're ashamed of God? And you're ashamed of Christ at that moment? It sounds like you are. I don't know the answer to that. It's an old problem and a vexing one, quite frankly. Yes?
I was just looking up world population estimates, a little bit kind of interesting. So according to Wikipedia,
Reliable source.
Since 50,000 BC, there's been approximately 105 billion people. So I don't know, from a Christian standpoint, I don't know if that would be conservative or an over, depending how you view the pre-flood era.
Right.
They've got an extra 50,000 years, but most of their estimate is in the last 2 centuries. They think the population is very small before that. Anyway. The other thing was, I thought it was kind of interesting, in the list of evils, you had cowardliness or fearfulness as one of those. And that, I don't know if that's really in other lists of, like when you have lists in the Bible of evils.
Yeah, Paul makes other lists, and cowardly is not, as to my knowledge, in that. The other stuff is, not that.
It's interesting because I don't really wake up in the morning being concerned that I'll murder somebody most of the time.
Yeah.
So, but,
Duck your heads, everybody.
most of the time. The idea of being cowardly, though, is much more close to home.
Yeah,
Something that could happen to me, you know, that
yeah. Yeah, and it does have to do with Jim's question. At what point are you cowardly? At what point? Yes, Dave.
Talking that cowardly thing, Paul Washer in that sermon they did like 10 years ago where it went viral,
Yeah.
he talks about how living on the straight and narrow path, you won't be cowardly. He talks about in Rome, if you lived in Rome and they came down the streets beating the drums with the incense, and you know they would require that you, Caesar is Lord, and they would say no, Lord is Lord, off with their heads. There was no chance of being cowardly in that time, but it's just he has that in his sermon that he brings up.
Yeah. We all have to have a point that we will not go. Otherwise, we'll just go back and back and back and back and back. In our major corporations, it's going to become more and more a thing where you will have to show up to a homosexual wedding if you're going to get promoted. It's going to start happening. And at some point, you have to say, you know what, I'm not going to go any more than this, no matter what it costs me. There's all these small compromises, I'll call them compromises on the way. Are they real compromises? I don't know. But we all have to have a point. We said we're not going to do this. We're just not going to go there. When you go to a wedding, are you not approving of what's happening? Yes. Dan.
I think we have lots of examples in Scripture of people fleeing and running and hiding and doing things in secret and spying that wouldn't normally a person would plan to be, oh, that's because they're afraid. But it wasn't because they were afraid, like the spies and stuff who went to Canaan, they weren't afraid because they did things, you know, concealed themselves and they hid and they snuck around. And I think when Moses killed the Egyptian and buried his body and then fled, it said because he did not fear the king of Egypt, he did this. But looking at it, you're like, oh, they hid the body and then he ran. You think, oh, he must be afraid. He wasn't.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe we should always be positioning ourselves, how can we best promote the kingdom of heaven? That might be the question to ask above our own, or it is, above our own personal safety. Moses was in a position where he couldn't do much good anymore. As we mentioned before, Stephen says that they did not follow him at that time. So he goes and he waits 40 years until they were ready to follow him. It took 40 years. Yes?
So I wonder if I might make a suggestion, not to say that I have the answer to the question that we're all wondering about, but I think, is it possible that the answer lies in the difference between what's prescribed, what texts are prescriptive versus what's descriptive? So for instance, like, well, the commandments are all, even in this case, we read Isaiah 40, where it says, a voice says, call out, and then what we're supposed to do is proclaim the word of the Lord, and it stands forever, and so on. And all of the instruction is to be bold, and so on. And maybe it's just that, that the difference between the examples that we see is not that God has a greater plan in steering people, in ways that are, we see a lot of things in Acts that are not necessarily normative. They're special, and that the answer is that God has chosen to move in a certain way. For instance, even like the example of Rahab, we're talking about and so on. She lied, but she's rewarded in the scriptures for her faith. And it's not that the right thing to do is lie necessarily so much as faith causes you to do a thing, and the action itself is made pure by the fact that God is guiding it. So maybe for all of us, we should just focus on being bold. Proclamation is the answer in this day, and if God chooses to guide us in a different way, to preserve ourselves and to preach another day. Even Paul and Jesus, they fled at different times, and it's because God had a plan, and it wasn't because they were running afraid. It was because because there was a plan, and God was guiding.
Certainly that lack of boldness has gotten us into the trouble we're in today. I mean, other things have too, but we just small after small after small, we back up, and it's like we're trading land for peace. You know, we're not going to say anything. Oh, peace. By the time we're done, we're lucky. We're censoring ourselves even in our own houses, because who's going to hear us? Backing up. Yeah. So one last question.
I was just another off of Dan. I mean, the disciples after Christ was crucified, they were in locked doors.
Yeah, they were.
They were behind. Think of all the people that would be bold,
Yeah.
but you know, they ran out of the garden. They fled,
Yeah.
denied him basically, and
Yeah.
then they were behind locked doors. For
Yeah. The thing about remember them is ultimately they came out from behind those locked doors and all got themselves killed. Every one of them, apparently. Even John, I think. Some people think not. But in any case, when it finally came down to it, they were bold. Although they did have their moments, for sure. And they ran. Couldn't run fast enough out of the garden. All right, I want to thank you for your kind attention here this morning.